So I'm going to be speaking about the 12 creative hierarchies. Everybody see my screen okay? I'm hoping.
Yeah,
So,
good.
Everything's good. I'm doing a partial screen thing. Okay. Everything in our universe is composed of tiny elemental lives, which emerge out of what is collectively called Devic substance. These lives have their origins in the Great Mother, the source of all form life. The 12 creative hierarchies consist of the builders of the archetypes that determine the configuration that these tiny elemental lives shape themselves into. Let's back up a minute. There's a few concepts there. These hierarchies consist of the builders of the archetypes, not the builders of the external outer forms, but the builders of the archetypes that determine, those archetypes, determine the configuration that these tiny elemental lives shape themselves into. The hierarchies form an unbroken chain of lives from the absolute, the universal source of all, to the tiniest inspirited entities. All form life associated with our solar system can be found in one or more of these hierarchies. Through their varying qualities, patterns, and energy structures, they create the world of appearances, the outer garment of all entities on all planes of existence. DK tells us that forms are built from the form of atoms to the body of the ego, from the form of a flower to the vast planetary or solar lotus, because the hierarchies exist as the aggregate of germ lives, giving the impulse, providing the model, and procuring through their very existence the entire raison d'etre of all that is seen on all the planes. What a statement. So the builders that comprise the 12 creative hierarchies are negatively polarized and thus responsive to the ray energy that pours through their particular hierarchy. For example, notice that the ray numbers of the hierarchical planetary rulers here in this column of the 7 astrological signs that currently condition our solar system are the same as the numbers of the hierarchies themselves, which are the names of the rays. Thus, second ray Jupiter, for example, rules the second manifested hierarchy, third ray Saturn, the third hierarchy, etc., confirming the fact that the Devic substance of each of the hierarchies is positively conditioned by their ruling rays. They literally give a face to their ruling ray potency. Said another way, the archetypes that determine the form life of all within the solar ring pass not is conditioned by and a direct expression of the rays that rule each hierarchy. This is why, for example, the human hierarchy as a whole is so profoundly conditioned by the fourth ray, which comes to us via Mercury in its role as hierarchical ruler of Scorpio. In addition to the positive-negative polarity of the rays as conditioning entities of the hierarchies, there is also a positive-negative polarity within each hierarchy, with the evolutionary devas forming the positive aspect and the lesser lives which are manipulated by these devas forming the negative polarity. So, using the elemental lives, the evolutionary devas create the templates which are specifically qualified and differentiated energy patterns of all that take shape in matter, thereby determining the appearance of all sentient beings as they manifest on their designated plane of existence. Continuing with the theme of polarity, each hierarchy is also negatively polarized to the hierarchy above it, thus acting as the form aspect of that hierarchy. It follows then that each hierarchy is positively polarized not only to the hierarchy directly beneath it, but to all the hierarchies beneath it, thus either directly or indirectly stimulating their spiritual growth. This is the science behind service, by which we become agents of the law of attraction, each hierarchy being the agency of the law of attraction, of the law of service for that hierarchy that is immediately beneath it. Here are the polarities of the four hierarchies that form the human kingdom. Through this interactivity, each hierarchy flowers forth and expresses its form life through the medium of those beneath it. DK says, these interlocking energies play through, traverse, return, stimulate, and energize every part of our solar system. All this movement is infused with an evolutionary urge because the hierarchies work under the law of attraction, the guiding law of the builders. The 7 manifested hierarchies make up our current solar system. The lowest 4 of these are concerned with manifestation in the 3 worlds of human endeavor, which makes up the dense physical body of the solar logos. Thus, their forms are composed of mental, astral, and etheric substance. Notice that the physical matter that forms our dense outer shell is not included. We'll get to that in a minute. So, our sheaths, both visible and invisible, consciously realized and as yet unrealized, are made up of the ray qualified substance of one or more of these 4 hierarchies. As a result, we as human beings have our being within a structure that allows us to evolve our consciousness through progressively more rarefied Davic substance. First, we are identified with the energy of matter as it expresses itself through the lunar lords of the 6th hierarchy, then with the energy of the soul as it expresses itself through the integrated personality of the 5th hierarchy, and finally with the energy of the monad as it expresses itself through the 4th hierarchy. During this long pilgrimage, we remain allied with and expressions of the same 4 hierarchies, but our consciousness gradually shifts its alignment with the positive polarity, first with the 6th, then with the 5th, and finally with the 4th hierarchy. This shift is made possible by the interrelated polarities of the hierarchies. Evolution itself could be defined as the upward progress from negative to positive polarity. And with each shift, we discover a new realm of consciousness to grow into, such as moving from the personal Mars to the impersonal Neptune. The nature of the fire that determines the quality of the interrelation of the hierarchies changes from fire by friction for the 2 sublunar hierarchies to solar fire, which draws the personality into soul awareness, and finally to electric fire, which draws the soul-infused personality into monadic consciousness. Okay, let's take a closer look at the Davic lives that make up these 4 lowest hierarchies. The 6th and 7th hierarchies are made up of the little lives that express the lowest qualities of the quaternary. They are, we're told, conscious ethereal entities, as invisible as ether, which we learn in the secret doctrine are, quote, shot out like the boughs of a tree from the first central group and shoot out in their turn numberless side groups, the lower of which are the nature spirits or elementals of countless kinds and varieties, from the formless and unsubstantial, the ideal thoughts of their creator, down to the atomic, though to human perception, invisible organisms. Okay, now let's take a look at each hierarchy individually. Coming in at number 7, we have the lesser builders, who determine the archetypal patterns through which the forms of the etheric physical plane are produced. These include those elemental lives that constitute the positive pole of the energy found at the heart of every atom. The Secret Doctrines calls these lives terrestrial spirits, which configure themselves in such a way that they actually form the etheric physical body. These lesser lives even inform the physical atoms of substance, and because they are sentient, they are subject to the laws of karma. Imbued with the most material aspect of the seventh ray, which is represented by the color violet, its ruler is the moon, whose work in relation to humanity is to form what is sometimes called the prison of the soul, creating, in response to karmic law, the body types and the qualities of the energy through which the indwelling jiva works to effect its own emancipation. But it does this blindly, following the dictates of the lunar lords of the sixth hierarchy, for whom they are the, quote, basket of nourishment, a name given to this hierarchy because they are the living substance of the physical etheric plane. Below this lowest of hierarchies are those occultly inert lives which are used by the lowest two hierarchies to form the concrete physical vehicles of all that is visible upon the physical plane. They are thus the densest concretion of spirit in the universe, comprised, we're told, of the failures of the system preceding this. And their failure, DK tells us, was so complete from the standpoint of consciousness that all the response they can make to the positive vibration of the seventh hierarchy is to simply be attracted to it. Only at the close of this solar system, after eons of stimulation, will they finally be in a condition to become the lowest hierarchy for the next solar system. They have no name other than the refuse of that which earlier was seen. Since they lie completely below the threshold of logoic awareness, the little atomic lives that make up the seventh hierarchy are considered to be their saviors because they draw them from inertia into conscious activity. By the way, the role of the seventh hierarchy as saviors gives us a hint as to the purpose of deity as regards all manifestation. For the positive polarity in every hierarchy acts as a redemptive energy, uplifting the lives in the hierarchy directly beneath it. Okay, standing just above the seventh, and using that hierarchy to build the forms of its own sixth hierarchy of the lunar lords, called also the greater builders, the sacrificial fires, the Bahishad Pitris, and the lunar ancestors. They use the energy of matter called Kundalini Shakti and are ruled by sixth ray Mars, the hierarchical ruler of Sagittarius, whose astral quality is symbolized by the color red and whose field of expression is the sacral center. They, quote unquote, ooze out their astral doubles, which become the models for human physical forms. The models, not the forms themselves. The goal and eventual destiny of these lives is identification with the personality. An old commentary says of them, the devas hear the word go forth. They sacrifice themselves, and out of their own substance, They build the form desired. They draw life and the material from themselves and yield themselves to the divine impulse. As the source of our physical vitality, this sixth hierarchy expresses itself through our etheric bodies, as well as constituting the elementals of our threefold personalities. It is these elementals that eventually have to be brought under the control of the solar aspect. Because they are devoid of any self-awareness, these lunar lords, also called lesser Petries, progress unconsciously with the tide of evolution. Summarizing this hierarchy, DK says, fire by friction, path of evolution, life experiment, human life. Goal, identification with the personality, produces responsiveness to planetary influences. Next, we move on to the mental plane into the element of fire, where we find the fifth hierarchy. These great beings are the Agnishvatas, or solar angels, builders of the body of the ego, and thus the producers of self-consciousness in the human being, which eventually enables us to become self-realized. They are the seekers of satisfaction and the cause of the second fall into generation, the first being the monadic fall into the level of the soul awareness, and then the second fall into generation, physical incarnation, which is why they seek incarnation. Thus, the energy associated with them is called Iksha Shakti, or the will to manifest. The Hindu word Iksha Shakti literally means volition. This is the high seat of the human personality, called the crocodiles, or Makara, whose goal and destiny is divine marriage with the hierarchy above them, of course. Thus, this fifth hierarchy is considered feminine to the masculine fourth above it. Another way of describing their relative positive-negative polarity. Addressing this association with the crocodiles, DK says, it becomes the task of the fifth hierarchy, the mysterious beings that preside over the constellation Capricornus, or crocodile in India and Egypt, to inform the empty and ethereal animal form and make of it the rational man. These great lives are called saviors of the race because they emanate a redemptive energy that, quote, lifts the lower aspects up to heaven. This energy is imbued with the principle of at-oneing, which is also a fundamental quality of the solar logos. Thus, both demonstrate as 12-petaled lotuses. DK gives us the following tabulation. A, the logoic 12-petaled egoic lotus on the cosmic mental plane. B, the solar 12-petaled lotus. C, the planetary logoic heart center, also a 12-petaled lotus. D, the 12-petaled human egoic lotus on the mental plane, the fifth creative hierarchy. E, the 12-petaled heart center in a human being. The fifth creative hierarchy represents in time and space on the mental plane the essence of humanity, for it is the inherent volition of this hierarchy that enables human beings to unfold their own 12-petaled egoic lotuses and thus free themselves from the limitation of the form that they themselves have constructed out of the hierarchies beneath. The fifth hierarchy is inherently monastic and thus distributes energy on the fifth subplane of every plane. This puts it in a position to mediate between the higher four, the etheric subplanes of each plane, and those lesser lies found on the lower three subplanes, eventually leading to a unification of Atma, Buddhi, Manas, the spiritual triad, the true divine self on one hand and the quaternary or lower self on the other. This mediating role, made possible by the law of magnetic control, makes this hierarchy the middle principle in the human constitution, a quality described in an old commentary. They lift one hand aloft to him who standeth just above. They lean one hand downward to the man who standeth next below. The hands, freed from the transverse arms, are freed but to be held. Only the empty, nail-marked hands can keep the chain complete. So it is through their work that the disciple gradually becomes conscious of that which lies above the monastic plane. For manas, we're told, is the vehicle of Buddhi, the form through which the Buddhic principle is able to make itself known. Thus, it is through the mediating work of the fifth hierarchy, ruled by the fifth ray, that the key words for that ray are realized, that universal mind, higher mind, and the lower concrete mind unite in order to demonstrate as the unified transpersonal mind. In a treatise on cosmic fire, we read, quote, "The solar angels concerned with the fifth hierarchy are naturally a potent factor in the evolution of the fifth or spiritual kingdom. They are also that which makes it possible, for they not only bridge the gap between the fourth and third kingdoms, but bridge that found between the fourth and fifth." The monastic orientation of the fifth hierarchy is mirrored in a particular group of names given them, which include Manasaputras, Manasadianis, sons of Mahat, mind-born sons, and the sons of universal mind. The fire of mind that they embody is bound up in the quote-unquote secret of the dragon. And it was this dragon influence or serpent energy that caused the influx of monastic energy into our solar system. Unlike the two hierarchies beneath it, they do not create using physical means, but reproduce their kind through the power of mind alone. This freedom from astral and physical plane influences is mirrored in another set of names given them: holy ascetics, holy yogis, virgin ascetics, and holy youths. These beings, we're told, attained self-consciousness in the preceding solar system and are known in this second solar system as the vehicles of divine mind. DK tells us that the at-oneing energy of this hierarchy also makes possible a link between a disciple's 7 head centers and the 7 egoic groups on the mental plane, which opens up a whole new area of study, suggesting, for example, that our soul ray is directly linked with our etheric vehicle through the particular head center that responds to that ray, which in turn links it to its lower etheric counterpart. So, for example, if you have a second ray soul, it will be etherically linked and thus can be accessed by means of the heart in the head, as well as the heart center, thus activating the double triangle of forces shown right over here and described in esoteric healing. Okay, one last piece of info on this hierarchy. Because we are in the 5th root race, the 5 Kumaras that represent race 3 through 5 channel to our planet the 5th ray force of the Lord of the planet Venus, who embodies in himself the function of the 5th hierarchy. Summarizing this hierarchy, DK says, solar fire, path of discipleship, full life experience, soul life. Goal, identification with the soul, produces responsiveness to the 12 zodiacal constellations. DK stresses the numerical importance of the hierarchies throughout his teachings on this subject, and not just through the ray associations, such as the embodiment of the function of the fifth hierarchy by the fifth ray Venus, but in other ways too. For example, DK says, quote, "The fourth creative hierarchy is in reality the ninth, and that is why it is called the hierarchy of initiates." 9, as you may well know, is the number associated with initiation. From a human perspective, the source and goal of the lowest three hierarchies, which collectively make up the form aspect of humanity, is the fourth manifest hierarchy, whose lives, an old commentary tells us, are the points of fire who must become the flame, hence their name, Lords of Flame. This upward shift from fire, DK's name for the form aspect of flame, happens through a transformation in consciousness of the indwelling jiva, which takes place in its eons-long evolutionary journey up through the three lower hierarchies. In the beginning, when humanity was on the involutionary arc, this fourth hierarchy, we're told, was the nursery for those monads preparing for incarnation in this solar system, and thus carried within it the germs of the lives which had achieved the human stage in another solar system, but whose further development was arrested by the coming in of Pralaya. There's an extraordinary teaching in Letters on Occult Meditation that describes the 7 great logoic breaths by which the substance of this solar system evolved. This teaching also reveals the key position held by the fourth creative hierarchy in this solar system. So here's the occult version of the creation story. First, by means of a great in-breath, the Logos gathered into himself the matter needed for solar systemic manifestation. This eons-long stage was followed by the first great out-breath, through which the Logos initiated the evolution of matter. With the second great breath, the matter aspect differentiated itself from spirit. At the third great breath, matter was infused with the activity aspect, making evolution possible. These 3 breaths all set the stage for the fourth great breath, which is especially relevant to human evolution. For with this out-breath, certain hierarchies responded, and the builders that inhabit those hierarchies began to experience the plan, to see it more clearly. There is, DK tells us, a causal link between the fourth breath and the fourth creative hierarchy, which has had a unique effect on Earth during this fourth round. Not surprisingly, this fourth breath demonstrates as the harmonic note of the fourth orbitic plane and of the fourth ray, which has permeated humanity since the fourth root race of this fourth globe. Again, we see the resonant conditioning effect of number. We tend to view history as a series of events, but in truth, these events are responses to the logoic note and breath that, unbeknownst to us, permeates our consciousness. Thus, we could say that the ever-present struggle to grasp the ideal of harmony and peace is actually humanity's response to this fourth great logoic breath. As part of a deeply occult description of this fourth breath, DK says, subtone 4 of the threefold word is the sound of the human hierarchy, and in its entirety might be called the cry of man. So it is through these great breaths that the Logos incarnates. In a fascinating detail, we're told that the fourth hierarchy of monads on its own plane emulates this logoic breath and sends out its own breath and note, so that it too may take on the sheaths of matter that will allow it to fulfill its destiny, which is, we're told, to create harmony and beauty in nature through blending into one functioning related unity, the soul in all forms. This stupendous goal is achieved individually at first, then in group formation, and finally by the entire human kingdom. When this takes place, most of the human egos, we're told, in that future time will be expressing themselves through the fourth ray personalities, thus facilitating the task of fusion, and the consciousness of its advanced units will be consciously functioning on the fourth or Buddhic plane. The resonant effect of the logoic fourth breath, which makes possible this goal of the fourth hierarchy, is not the energy, the imprisoning cube that characterizes the lower quaternary, but rather four as the unifying energy of the midway point, an energy that mediates between the three above and the three below on every subplane, thus achieving harmony between spirit and form aspects. I reach one hand above, I reach one hand below. It is this energy of four expressing itself through the Buddhic plane, personified by Mercury as the hierarchical ruler of Scorpio, now truly fulfilling its role as messenger of the gods, that unifies the threefold personality with the spiritual triad. Summarizing this hierarchy, DK says, electric fire, path of initiation, full soul expression, monadic life, goal, identification with the monad, produces responsiveness to the three constellations. Okay, directly above the fourth hierarchy are the triads, also called the triple flowers of the previous solar system, which we're told wield the third aspect of electric force in their role as lords of sacrifice and love. Excuse me. This is the first hierarchy counting upwards that is in realized contact with its emanating source. These folks never pass beyond the logoic etheric levels and thus never incarnate. Rather, they hold in themselves like a beacon the potencies of mental, psychical, and spiritual evolution, and are thus considered to be the great donors of immortality. Being the fifth hierarchy counting upwards, they are the noumenal source and force of mind, called in Hindu Jnana Shakti. The fact that they are the 8th of 12 hierarchies aligns them with the cosmic Christ and makes them, quote, the eightfold points awaiting opportunity to flame forth. DK gives us this terse warning. It is the rejection of the triadal lives by units in the fourth hierarchy that of the human man, that of the human monads, which precipitates a man eventually into the 8th sphere. It is the rejection of the triadal lives by units in the fourth hierarchy, which precipitates a man eventually into the 8th sphere. He refuses to become a Christ, a savior, and remains self-centered. It is this statement that reveals the polarity between the third and fourth hierarchies. Next up are the divine builders, also called the bright crested ones, who make up the second hierarchy and who are the prototypes of our monads, not the source of our monads, but rather their ideal, their ideal prototype. DK makes a point of saying that they are not our monads themselves, for they are far higher. So high, in fact, that they are close allies with those lives who make up the Great Bear. It is the energy of this hierarchy that results in the manifestation of the divine androgyne, the divine androgyne. Because of the purity of their vibration, they have found and still find no opportunity to incarnate during this second solar system, because unlike the 5 hierarchies we've already covered, they are in essence an expression of the logoic cosmic astral sheaths, whereas the 5 hierarchies so far described are the expression of the logoic cosmic physical sheath. Thus, their influence on those hierarchies found on the cosmic physical plane is limited. But DK does mention that they are able to impart the ability to realize the nature of group consciousness. This is the second ray ability. And as we see, this second hierarchy is ruled by Jupiter, the second ray lord of our solar system, reminding us that these hierarchies are embodiments of the functions of the rays themselves. In Hinduism, Kriya Shakti, which DK defines as the energy of the materializing ideal, is one of 3 creative cosmic powers. The other 2 are Iksha Shakti, willpower, and Jnana Shakti, the power to know. DK rightly inserts Mantrika Shakti, the power of the word, above Iksha Shakti, the energy of volition, for it is the word that initiates this volition. All the manifest hierarchies, hierarchical Shaktis, are synthesized by the energy of the first hierarchy, called Parashakti, or supreme energy. Hinduism describes the Parashakti as the energy that creates, sustains, and governs all of manifestation. Those who belong to this first hierarchy, ruled by the sun veiling Uranus, which represents the first ray in its role as the final synthesizing planet, are called the divine flames, the lions of life, and the sons of necessity, among other names. These great lives, who we're told emanated from the heart of the central spiritual sun, express the mental vibration of the solar logos. The symbol of this hierarchy is the golden lotus with its 12 petals folded, not going to incarnate, they're folded. Okay, we'll end with a brief look at the unmanifested hierarchies. Their influence reached our Earth through the medium of the 5th hierarchy, which is ruled by Cancer, acting as the gate into manifested life for the solar system. These 5 hierarchies express the 3rd ray and its 4 rays of attribute, because they achieved liberation during the first solar system. The symbols linked to these hierarchies are numeral descriptors of their ruling signs. For example, the 3rd hierarchy, whose energy is light through knowledge, is ruled by Taurus and described as a bird with plumage dark and with the eye of radiant fire, very Taurian. Whereas the 4th hierarchy, whose energy is desire for duality, well, is ruled by Gemini and is described as 2 stars of vivid rose linked by a band of violet. A fascinating peek into 4 of the 5 unmanifest hierarchies can be found in Tabulation 3 from Esoteric Astrology, which lists the 2nd to the 5th hierarchies, along with a series of associations, some of which appear nowhere else. This is the hierarchic geek section. You know, this is like, if you're really into it. Anyway, the first of the 3 hierarchies listed under dynamic energy, electric fire, is the 5th creative hierarchy, which we here discover is related to Sirius, Saturn, and not just Cancer, but to the Cancer-Capricorn axes, and thus represents one arm of the cardinal cross. And by the way, there's no other mention of this association with Sirius. It's not in the text. It's just in this tabulation. The other arm of the cardinal cross is represented by the second creative hierarchy, which lies on the Aries-Libra axis and is associated with the Great Bear and the sun-veiling Vulcan. Here they are. Here the two are together with ray 7 controlling the vertical arm and ray 4, the horizontal arm. You could say more accurately that the energy of the 7th ray pours through this vertical axis of the cardinal cross, and the energy of the 4th ray pours through this horizontal arm. Okay, the third of the three hierarchies under dynamic energy, electric fire, is the 4th creative hierarchy, related to Mercury, the 6th ray, and the Gemini-Sag arm of the mutable cross. Only one arm in expression. And finally, the third hierarchy, the only one listed under magnetic energy, solar fire. It expresses 5th ray energy and is associated with the 7 solar systems, which I take to mean the one about whom not may be said. Mars and the Taurus-Scorpio axis of the fixed cross. A fascinating tabulation that raises more questions than it answers. By the way, DK tells us that it is not revealed through which sign of the zodiac the 1st or 12th, counting up, pours forth its energy. Okay, I'd like to end with the first few lines from stanza 2 of the Treatise on Cosmic Fire version of the stanzas of Zahn, which describe the creation of the hierarchies. Om, said the mighty one, and sounded forth the word. The 7-fold waves of matter resolved themselves, and varied forms appeared. Each took its place, each in the sphere ordained. They waited for the sacred flood to enter and to fill. The builders responded to the sacred sound. In musical collaboration, they attended to the work. They built in many spheres, beginning with the 3rd. Upon this plane, their work commenced. They built the sheath of Atma and strung it to its primary. And then it goes on for 2 pages describing each stage of hierarchical descent into the material realm. It's quite a read. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.